What is going on, Philroaders? I'm Joshua Thomas. You're watching the Philroad Express, and today we're going to talk about why, the very reason that Final Fantasy VII is as popular as it is today, why everyone's hyping over it, and that is nostalgia. And I've done a little bit of research on how exactly nostalgia affects us, and so I'm going to go over what I had hypothesized, what I thought nostalgia was doing, and what I've learned since then. And of course, I'm definitely not an expert on it. There are people who have spent decades researching just nostalgia by itself. So, um, if you hated the game, if you hated the remake, if you loved the remake, I hope you will stick around and watch this video and get, maybe you will learn something new. I don't expect that if you loved the game that I'm going to change your mind and make you say, oh man, I actually hate this game. And I don't expect that if you hated this game that watching this video is going to make you like the game. I was hoping I could create a video one day. For those of you who don't know, I like the game. I like the remake. I love the original. So I'm looking forward to remake part 2, and we're going to discuss a little bit about that as well, about how nostalgia is affecting different people. So one thing, it made me think about this because I was watching someone who gave a negative review of remake, and I try to watch positive and negative reviews because I love the game, and so I can watch all the positive reviews and feel really good about myself and find that they liked a lot of the stuff that I liked, and that's reaffirming. That's a good feeling to have. But there's also a lot of people out there who didn't like the game, and so they're more likely to maybe watch all the negative reviews. In fact, a lot of the comments that I see in the negative reviews talks about how, oh, finally I found someone who actually understands how this game is. Basically, all the people who hated the game were looking for someone who agreed with them. There's nothing wrong with that. It's self-validation. It's actually a part of the nostalgia. And when I was watching this negative review, I was thinking to myself, some of these reviews blame the positive reviews on nostalgia, but they loved the original game too. The people who gave whether you gave a negative or positive review of the remake, those who played the original generally had a fondness for the original, which means you have nostalgia for the original. So I was theorizing that these people who are blaming the people who loved it and saying, "Oh, it's nostalgia. This is the only reason they like the game is because of nostalgia." I was like, well, don't negative reviewers hate the game also because of nostalgia? Is it really just our personality? Is it just my nostalgia gives me a fondness for the original game, makes me want to see more, and so when I see these characters, even though it's a slightly different, slightly new adventure, that nostalgia is. Whereas for the people who give it a negative review, they look at the storyline overall and they say, this wasn't the storyline I wanted, this wasn't what I was expecting, the original was better, the past was better. And nostalgia has a lot to do with, hey, remembering. I think the definition of nostalgia was having a fond memory of a past event, usually a distant past event. So whether it's been 5 years or 20 something years since you played the original game, nostalgia is at work there. So that was my theory. It's that nostalgia was pretty much affecting negative and positive reviewers equally. And then I did the research, and I want to say, having watched the negative reviewers, they have some good arguments. We can't, if you love the game and it's priceless, it's this amazing remake, and you're like, how can, these people over here hate this game? How dare they hate this thing that I like? Just remember that you've got the people who agree with you. You've got all these positive reviews that agree with you, but there are people who didn't like the game. I'm hard pressed to remember any game that I've ever played where 100% of the people who played it loved it. So perhaps there are less people who hate it, but there are still a lot in the overall numbers. So many people hated the game, and they want that reaffirmation too. They want that good feeling of knowing that they're not the only one that hated the game. The good reviewers, though, I found gave really good points. They let the audience know, hey, look, some of this stuff is my personal opinion. So if I were to give a review of Final Fantasy VII Remake stating about all the things that I loved about the game, I'm probably going to leave out the things that I didn't like. Or maybe if there are some things I didn't like about the game and I talk about them, I'm going to preface it with, like, hey, look, this game isn't perfect, but the negative aspects of the game did not outweigh the positive aspects for me personally. So overall, that's why, in spite of its flaws, I loved the game. And I can also absolutely say that there are elements of the OG game that I like more than Remake, but I still like Remake. So for the negative reviewers, the changes that were made were kind of unforgivable. The OG was better, therefore this game is bad, essentially. So what I learned about nostalgia is actually interesting. I used to think that nostalgia was just simply a positive emotional attachment to something in the past. And when you think of that past event, it makes you happy. Nostalgia is more complex than just a fondness of something that happened in the past. It also has to do with how we are today, but it also has to do with just personalities. In other words, some people are going to, play this remake and hate it. Some are going to love it. And it makes me wonder if we are also maybe predisposed to either like it or hate it based on our own personalities. So one thing that I found in recent studies of nostalgia, and after this live stream, I'll try to remember to post the links to all or most of the studies that I looked at. I tried to look at the most modern studies that we had. So several were from 2019. It seems like a lot of nostalgia studies stopped back then. Maybe it's because in 2020, everyone was trying to be nostalgic, because damn, that year. But anyway, so I think two of the ones were from 2019. One was from 21, and I'll be sure to post links to that so you guys can see it. By the way, give me a comment if you're watching this, and just let me know if you liked the game or didn't like the game. I'll try to look up at the chat every once in a while and respond if anything. But yeah, let me know how you liked the original and how you liked the remake. Whether you loved the original, hated the remake, loved both of them, or let me know if you're not nostalgic at all, because remake is your first experience with Final Fantasy VII, so you can't have any nostalgia for it, right? Although it's been 2 years now, can you have nostalgia after 2 years? I don't know. So one thing is that nostalgia more often, or is a more powerful feeling at negative times in our life. So in other words, if we're unhappy in the present, we tend to be more nostalgic, because it's kind of like a mental defense mechanism. We are unhappy right now, so we think back to a time when things were simpler, and we remember this event, like, oh man, I remember that one summer after the fifth grade where me and my best friend, we went to the pool every single weekend and we just got to spend hours there swimming in the pool, going down the water slides, and just playing putt putt, and yeah, it was just fun. I can remember those, and I look fondly back on that. And when I look at myself today, I'm like, man, when's the last time I went swimming and just had fun with my friends? It's been a long time. So when we have bad times, we think back to better times. That's personal nostalgia. And there was another type of nostalgia I thought was interesting, which was historical nostalgia. And that is actually having a nostalgic feeling for a time that we don't remember, that perhaps even happened before we were born. So I might say, man, wouldn't it be great if like our current situation was more like the 1980s? I was born in 1984. I promise you, I don't remember the 80s at all. But I could still have this sort of romanticized nostalgia for it because of maybe a movie I saw, or all the positive things that I saw about the 80s, or who knows, whatever time period you want to talk about. It could be the Renaissance era. It could be the medieval era, whatever time you want to think about. We can be like, man, weren't times simpler back then? Didn't have to worry about this, didn't have to worry about that. No one was arguing about this, and it's probably because we just have a limited knowledge on it. But historical nostalgia is probably something that we are not experiencing when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, the original, and the remake. But, so the nostalgia is a defense mechanism because it's like, I was happy back then. Remember that time when I was happy. So, it made me realize that there is probably actually an imbalance of nostalgic feeling with positive and negative reviewers. And I want to say this too, if you're a negative reviewer, I'm definitely not trying to make fun of you here. And if you're a positive reviewer, I'm not trying to, empower you or whatever emotional response you might get. Or if you had negative opinions of the game, don't look at this as me making fun of you. It's just me coming to my own conclusion based on what I have learned about nostalgia. So it looks like negative reviewers may actually have more nostalgia for the original game than positive reviewers. In other words, the reason that these negative reviewers hated the remake. So we have a disconnection. Okay, looks like we have a successful reconnection. Hopefully everything goes good from here, and I apologize if you guys missed anything that I was saying. But it looks like, I'll reiterate what I was saying. It looks like people who negatively review Final Fantasy VII Remake, have a bigger attachment, a bigger nostalgic feeling for the original than people who gave it a positive review. So for me, I gave it a 10, and I admit that 10 comes with nostalgia. In other words, these were beloved characters that I'm getting to interact with again, and I felt like the game was well made, it was beautiful. The action / menu-based combat system worked well. It just had a very good flow to it. And I also admit that there are things that I think was done better in the OG, such as what we're seeing here, the introduction of Sephiroth and other things like that. Although I will maybe briefly touch on that a little bit about why I think they did it. I think what they did at the end, while it may not have been the perfect ending, was probably necessary. Maybe they could have done this necessary ending in a different way, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, while I recognize that there was padding in the game, for me the padding did not give me a negative feeling for the game, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm replaying the original Final Fantasy VII after having played the remake several times, and I'm encountering some of the same gripes about the remake in the OG. In other words, nostalgia also tends to only remember the positive things of Final Fantasy VII OG. There were negative things about OG as well, and they are also present in the new game. And while these negative aspects might have been a little different, maybe they were a little bit more acceptable back then in the PlayStation 1 era, it doesn't, save the creators at Square Enix from saying, oh, well, it was in the original, so, we could have some of this in the new game. Yeah, there was padding. There were other minor flaws and other story elements that I think were done better in the original. But overall, my overall feeling for the remake makes me happy. And so I'm fortunate in that. And it may be that I have less nostalgia for the original, or it may just be that maybe I'm just in a happier state in life. Maybe it just means that I'm just in a good mood, so the remake is good to me as well. Regardless, that's just how I see it, and the hook that maybe negative reviewers have for the original, it's also, like I said, a defense mechanism. So, the reviewer plays Final Fantasy VII Remake. Whether they were going into it with preconceived notions, I don't know. I don't know if I went into it with preconceived notions that this is going to be amazing. I probably did. I do wonder, however, if the people who hated the game came in with the preconceived notion that they were going to hate it. I know this happens a lot with people, not just with Final Fantasy VII. We can also look at Star Wars and see that, those of us who saw the original movies were much less likely to like the Disney trilogy. Now, people who didn't see the original movies first like the new trilogy. And while I feel that there's a little bit of a difference there, I think overall, most original Star Wars fans don't like the new trilogy. I think there are very many objective reasons why we can hate it. There are fundamental flaws and disconnects with the new Star Wars movies and the originals that old fans like myself said, you shouldn't have done that, or that's not how the universe works, or at least in Star Wars. So, and I feel like a lot of the people who gave it a negative review kind of feel the same way about this one, because, yeah, they did change a few things, and the positive reviewers may say, oh, well, it was changed for the better. So, one thing also about nostalgia that I learned was that nostalgia helps us move forward from a time of just unhappiness or from a bad time. Nostalgia gives us those feelings that we had way back when things were simpler and happier, and allows us to make it through the day. It allows us to move forward thinking, maybe I'll feel those feelings again someday. So I get that the negative reviewers found things they didn't like about the remake, latched onto those things, many of which are logical reasons and objective reasons. The padding, for one, is a good objective reason to not like the remake. But it also, I think, may come into play that people who give Final Fantasy VII Remake a negative review enjoy hating it, as whether that is nostalgia fueled or not. I really didn't learn enough about nostalgia to be able to say yay or nay to that, but it's a possibility. So what are, things that I can conclude here? One thing I can't change is definitely your mind. I said it in the beginning, and I'll say it again for those who are just now coming in. If you hate the remake, I can't make you like it. And I'm going to go into another video, which I really have to do much more prep work on, and it's going to be the storytelling of Final Fantasy VII Remake and the story overall. And I'm hoping that people who hated the game will watch that one, and maybe they will have a glimmer of hope, but that's only if my theory comes true, of course. So let's and another thing that I learned about nostalgia too is that we may be experiencing nostalgia more when we, especially going into 2020, it's very possible that there was an uptick in nostalgic feelings. So in the modern day times, when we interact with people, we may interact with them online. It's kind of like I'm interacting with you right now. One of the studies showed that online interactions, while they make us feel happy, aren't the same as in-person interactions. So back in the days before the internet existed, people may feel sad when they're alone, but when they get to see friends or relatives, it makes them happy. Well, in this era of interconnectedness that we have with the internet, we get this false sense of connectedness with our friends and family through things like Facebook and video chat and things like that. But it can't actually replace being with someone in person. So the next time you think to yourself, should I just call my friend? Should I just, send them a message on Facebook? Or maybe should I invite them over? Invite them over. Go out to dinner with them. We're finally getting back to normal. Go have a good conversation with your friend about Final Fantasy VII. It's just is going to make you feel happier, and maybe one day that happy event that you have in person with another person will be a nostalgic memory of the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I certainly learned a lot in learning about nostalgia, and definitely hope that if you're a negative reviewer or positive reviewer, you stood through to the end, and hope you learned a little something maybe about the game and about yourself. I will end it here. I know this is more of like a deep conversation about nostalgia, not so much Final Fantasy VII, but if you made it this far, I appreciate it. Hope you hit the like button and consider subscribing if you're into the videos I'm making. Be sure to watch more board game and video game videos, and be sure to check out this video right here. It is the reason that I think is objective and a lot of people get wrong. 25% of Midgar is the entire game. Or 25% of the entire game is Midgar in the original. So check on that, and I'll catch you next time.